You're listening to Nest Talk, the best and most elite Baltimore Ravens podcast on the internet. Now, here's your host, Christopher Linfont.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Ravens flock, my name is Christopher Linfont, and I am coming at you at 4:22 on Wednesday, March 13th, and you know what that means. It is the start of the new league year. The Baltimore Ravens have made a flurry of moves in the past few hours, and we've got a lot to talk about on today's show. Lots of craziness going on in the free agency frenzy. Le'Veon Bell signing with the Jets, the Giants trading Odell Beckham Jr. to the Cleveland Browns. Lots and lots of craziness, and of course, the Ravens are subject to this craziness too. Today's episode is going to be basically all free agency information here. But I do want to start out by saying that today is the day that Joe Flacco, Baltimore Ravens quarterback of 11 years, is officially traded to the Denver Broncos in exchange for a fourth-round draft pick. And, you know, as a huge Flacco fan myself, I find this, I'm not shocked because I knew it was coming. We knew it for months now. Ever since he was benched for Lamar Jackson, we all knew that he was going to be replaced completely. And then it was announced, I think, in January that he would be traded, or maybe it was February. Yeah, it was February, to the 49ers, the Denver Broncos for a fourth-round pick. But it is still sad to see him go after 11 years. And, if he happens to be listening, I'd like to say thank you very much for the past 11 years, and your tenure here was amazing, and Baltimore will always remember it. Another longtime Raven is on the way out. I do have to mention Terrell Suggs, 16-year Raven, the Raven to play in the most games ever with the team, is on the way out as well. He's signing with the Arizona Cardinals on a one-year deal for $7 million, and we'll talk about this later, but it stings to be losing these guys. It does sting, but we have to move on to a new point in Baltimore Ravens history. We've got a new legacy to chase with Eric DeCosta as GM, with Lamar Jackson at quarterback. We just have to find what we need to, our new faces of the franchise. And it's going to be rough, but we'll find them. But we'll never forget the likes of Terrell Suggs, the likes of Joe Flacco, the guys who really, really helped this franchise out for years on end. We'll never forget that. And we are deeply appreciative of those people. So now jumping in to the Ravens news. Again, basically this is all going to be about free agency today and a little bit about the draft. I've got our weekly draft player that we've been doing for a little while now. We won't be talking about a weekly free agent player simply because half of them are already off the table, and a whole bunch have yet to even come out onto the free agent market. So, it's going to be a crazy next few hours, next few days. They call it a free agency frenzy for a reason. So starting off here, we're going to go down these moves through chronological order. Obviously, the first move the Ravens made before the free agency frenzy itself is the re-signing of Nick Boyle. Nick Boyle was signed to a 3-year, $18 million contract, $6 million average per year on that contract. Many NFL GMs saw Nick Boyle as one of the best prospects as a tight end coming out in recent years. I remember an Adam Schefter tweet basically saying that he would be the best tight end in the past 3 or 4 years to be on the free agent market, and that is because of his amazing skills as a blocker. Nick Boyle is among the best, if not the best, blocking tight end in the NFL, and that is very valuable in a league where we're seeing an overwhelming majority of tight ends starting to move to being receiving threats only. When you have a guy like Nick Boyle who can, he's not the best receiver in the world, but he can get it done through the air if he's asked to do that. But when he blocks and when he makes those critical plays, those critical blocks in the running game, you really are able to do a whole lot more with your running game, with your running scheme. You can build around that. So Nick Boyle to the Baltimore Ravens, he's back, and a lot of GMs are going to want him. I heard reports that 20 or more teams at the NFL Combine were interested about Nick Boyle. So the Ravens were smart to get him before he even hits the free agent market. And they got him for a pretty cheap contract, $18 million for 3 years. A lot of people out there, the reaction was, why Nick Boyle, right? He barely makes any catches. He's never had an NFL touchdown. Well, he had, with Lamar Jackson, a quarterback, ready for this, 308 snaps at tight end. That is 100 more than the second highest played tight end with Lamar Jackson. Actually, it's more than 100 more. That was Mark Andrews. I think Hayden Hurst was third. So he has a big-time impact in what the Ravens did last year and presumably what they're going to try to do next year. They're going to try to continue this hard-nosed rushing attack with Lamar Jackson, a quarterback, and with a new running back. And we'll get into that in a little bit. I know you guys are excited to hear all the information about the free agents the Ravens have signed so far. But he's going to be a crucial part to this running game. Nick Boyle is again among the best blocking tight ends in the league, and what he brings to the table is very valuable to the Baltimore Ravens. And they wanted to lock him down. John Harbaugh wanted to lock him down. Eric DeCosta wanted to lock him down. They get the deal done. And I think this is a great move, honestly, by Baltimore. It rounds out this tight end core. You've got Hayden Hurst, the big body tight end, who can really become a receiving threat, and I think a blocking threat too with his size and his strength. Has yet to show what he needs to show. You don't want to say he's a draft bust yet, but his first year wasn't that encouraging, so he's got to, do better this year. And then you've got Mark Andrews, who is a phenomenal pass-catching tight end. He reminds me of Dennis Pitta, an uninjured Dennis Pitta, basically. And he's going to be a quarterback's best friend for a while, Mark Andrews, but he's not a blocking tight end. But Nick Boyle is a blocking tight end, and now you've got probably the best tight end group in the National Football League with these three, and you're done. You don't need to go into the draft and get another tight end. You don't need to go out and grab a huge tight end to sign. You're basically done. You can just sit with this, maybe add an undrafted free agent or two just for camp, but you're not going out and looking to, overhaul this position anytime soon, because now all these guys are going to be here for the next 3 years. You've got them all under contract for 3 years. Hayden Hurst could be here for another 4 with his option. So really great way for the Ravens to start out the free agency frenzy before, the NFL even dives into it. But moving on now, the second chronological piece the Ravens have here in the free agency frenzy, we have, the Ravens obviously had problems retaining C.J. Mosley. That's no secret. So, he was negotiating with the Ravens since training camp, and nothing came of it. Once the free agency window opened up, the Ravens, who were still in the bidding war for C.J. Mosley, started either talking to or were interested in Brandon Marshall. Not the wide receiver Brandon Marshall. Brandon Marshall, the linebacker, inside linebacker for the Denver Broncos. He's a free agent now, and he's going to sign with a new team this year. And the Ravens were reportedly interested in acquiring Brandon Marshall. And the reason for this, obviously, is because they were wary about, whether or not they could re-sign C.J. Mosley, basically. So they were starting to develop a backup plan. And they thought that Brandon Marshall could be that backup plan. I don't know if they extended him an offer. I just know that they are interested. I don't know if they've talked to Brandon Marshall. I just know they are interested, or were interested at least a couple nights ago. He still remains on the free agent market. James Palmer was the one who reported this first on Monday. So, he's still in the market. And maybe part of that is because, he only played in 7 games before getting injured, I believe, last year. 42 combined tackles. He's 29. He'll be turning 30 soon. I don't know exactly when. Look, the Ravens could still sign him. But I honestly think that there is another free agent linebacker, inside linebacker on the market that I think the Ravens should go after, instead of Brandon Marshall. If they have to get Brandon Marshall because they can't get the other guy, fine, so be it. But I think that there is another free agent inside linebacker on this market they can get for cheap, and we will talk about him in a little bit. But I want to keep moving chronologically here so we can capture all of our Ravens free agent news. efficiently and effectively. And the next move is, of course, Terrell Suggs signing with the Arizona Cardinals. This is a move that hit a lot of Ravens fans hard. Terrell Suggs talked about being a Raven for life, and now he's heading off to Arizona. This is not a case of the Ravens letting a player walk. From my understanding, the Ravens were interested in keeping Suggs back. They had some sort of dialogue with him or his agent, and had an offer on the table, to my knowledge. But Suggs ended up taking what appears to be more money in Arizona to go home, to spend 1 year, playing at home. He lives in Arizona, I believe. He's got at least a house out there. He went to school at Arizona State. I mean, this is, he moved to Arizona when he was a kid, so this is, his home, right? Baltimore's his home away from home, but this is really his home, Arizona. And I don't really blame him for going to Arizona. They're going to pay him $7 million in this 1 year, on this 1 year deal, to be a rotational, well, maybe not rotational, for $7 million, but he's going to have a big piece of the pie this upcoming season. He slowed down with the Ravens. The Ravens cut his snap count basically in half, last year. And he didn't have as much production towards the end of the year than he did in the beginning. The writing was on the wall that Terrell Suggs' last year would either be this year or next year, meaning 18 and 19. And it looks like it's going to be 2019. It's going to be his last year. I think he'll retire after the 2019 season. He'll probably sign a 1-day deal with the Baltimore Ravens, to remain a Raven for life kind of thing. But he's going to Arizona, and it is a deal that's going to hit a lot of Ravens fans hard. But the Ravens could not afford to keep him for $7 million. For what he would amount to be as a rotational linebacker. For $7 million, with the tight cap space, with other more pressing needs, the Ravens just couldn't compete. They just, no possible way that they were going to pay for that kind of money for Terrell Suggs at this point in his career. Terrell Suggs 4 years ago, $7 million is a steal. But Terrell Suggs now, at this point in his career, it would be a problem to pay him that kind of money. And you have to do what's best for your team, even if it hurts sometimes. So the Ravens are going to walk away from Terrell Suggs, and Terrell Suggs will walk away from the Ravens, at least for a year. I assume that he will come back and sign his 1-day deal next year and retire a Baltimore Raven before heading to Canton in 5 to 10 years. I would imagine he's a first, second, or third ballot Hall of Famer. And of course, he will be inducted to the Ring of Honor, the Ravens Ring of Honor, basically immediately after he retires. So the Ravens lose both Joe Flacco and Terrell Suggs today. So big, franchise-changing moment here that we're all witnessing. In other news, the Ravens lost out on Tyrann Mathieu, the free safety, former Cardinal, speaking of the Cardinals here, and Texan. He played with the Texans last year. The Ravens, I believe, had interest in Tyrann Mathieu after cutting Eric Weddle to save cap space. But Mathieu ultimately wanted a little bit more money than the Ravens were going to shell out as they were, making moves to try to re-sign C.J. Mosley. They couldn't shell out a whole lot of money for him. And he ends up signing with the Chiefs on a 3-year, $42 million deal, average annual salary of $14 million. Again, the Ravens had to resist the urge to spend a ton of cash while they were still negotiating with C.J. Mosley. It looks like C.J. Mosley, they at least had a shot left at him. He wasn't completely gone. So they were trying not to spend, all their cap space here on a free safety, even though Tyrann Mathieu would have been, I think, a really nice addition to this defense. They had to stick to their guns here. And, they're going to end up spending about just this much money on another free safety we'll talk about in a little bit. But again, I would have liked Mathieu in this defense, but you can't just swing it with C.J. Mosley still out there and you're trying to get him back. But ultimately, he'll go to the Chiefs and improve that defense, one of the worst secondaries in the league last year, even though they were very successful in the regular season and went to the AFC Championship. They were a very bad secondary and definitely need this overhaul. So the Chiefs get what they need in Tyrann Mathieu, and the Ravens miss out, but do get a very good player only a day later. So C.J. Mosley also is gone. C.J. Mosley heading to the New York Jets. The Baltimore Ravens fought. I will commend Eric DeCosta. He fought very hard to get C.J. Mosley back, but ultimately he couldn't muster enough money to get C.J. Mosley back, and he refused to overpay him when the New York Jets would overpay him. Look, I absolutely love C.J. Mosley. I love what he brought to the Ravens. I love how he played inside linebacker, and he was overall a great person. But $17 million a year for C.J. Mosley, for any inside linebacker, is ridiculous. Okay? C.J. Mosley is a fantastic player, but he has problems in coverage. No way can I justify paying $17 million on our cap space to C.J. Mosley per year to have him be basically a run stuffer, special team linebacker with the occasional good play in the secondary. He has problems covering in the secondary. It's a problem. The Jets overpaid him. The Ravens offered $14 million per year. They refused to sign him to a franchise tag, which would have been $15 million next year. They stuck to their guns, and they did the harsh thing, but I think it's the thing that had to be done. They could not go out and pay C.J. Mosley $17 million a year just to try to keep him. I guess he wasn't interested in taking a hometown discount. I know he wanted to stay with the Ravens, but when you're getting offered $3 million more per year over a 5-year contract, the contract is worth $85 million, $51 million guaranteed. I don't really see how you can turn that down, and I don't blame him. This is a business; he's got to get paid, and he made a business decision. Is it ideal for us? No. Is it ideal for him? Maybe not, but it's the business decision he chose. And the Ravens, made the best business decision they could. And they're going to have a need an inside linebacker now. I believe they can address this in the draft, but I also believe they will address it at least in free agency to start with. It's tough to see Mosley go with a lot of these other Ravens players that I've admired for years now. He's one of my favorite players of the past few years, but DeCosta stuck to his guns, and he committed to not overpaying players, and ultimately, this is the best decision he could have made. Once the franchise tag wasn't placed on Mosley, you knew he was probably gone just because of how much money he was going to get paid on the open market. His market value is insanely high with $17 million. I don't know how many linebackers get $17 million, or at least inside linebackers. I mean, they're important, don't get me wrong. But to pay C.J. Mosley $17 million, the Jets are just blowing money because they have money. And they're not done. We're going to talk about them again very soon. But first, we're going to go up north to Titletown, where we have to talk about the Green Bay Packers, who stole away Za'Darius Smith, the linebacker Za'Darius Smith. So at this point, the Ravens have already lost 2 players. Or should I say, did they lose? Yeah, no, 3 players with Terrell Suggs. They lost 2 players on Tuesday at this point. 3 if you count Terrell Suggs from the night before. So as expected, Za'Darius Smith, he attracted a lot of money on the open market. I mean, a lot of money. We're going to get right into this here. I expected the Ravens to basically let him walk because the numbers people were talking about, $12, $13 million, I couldn't see the value in it. But he ends up getting, ready for this, $16 million per year, 4 years, $66 million deal. Why on earth would the Green Bay Packers pay Za'Darius Smith, of all people, $66 million overall, $16 million a year for 4 years? I mean, look, I don't have anything against Za'Darius Smith, right? He's a good player, a good dude, no problems with him. But his best year was 8.5 sacks. He had 2 good years. His rookie year, 5.5 sacks. When he basically ghosted in the defense for 2 years when Terrell Suggs wasn't injured from that Achilles. That's why he got that playing time in his rookie year. And this year, he gets 8.5 sacks, and you're going to pay him $66 million? That's unbelievable to me. I mean, he is in his prime, but $66 million over 4 years? How on earth can you justify that? I just don't understand. If the Ravens wanted to compete with him, I mean, I could see 11, 12 maybe would be, my pushing limit. But 16 a year? I don't understand this move at all by the Packers. I mean, as soon as the Ravens heard that deal, they probably said, okay, bye. right? Because, there's a lot of edge rushers in this draft. There's guys out there like Justin Houston they can sign for cheap. There's no way that Za'Darius Smith, what he's produced on the field so far, is worth $60 million, in my opinion. Again, I have no problem with Za'Darius Smith. He's a good person. He's a great player. But what he's produced so far, I don't think merits $66 million over 4 years. I just don't see it. Again, the Ravens, I think, are going to go after, at least inquire about Justin Houston. He's still in the open market, the former Kansas City Chief. And I think overall, the more important pass rusher that was on this defense last year was Matt Judon. I'm more concerned if they can extend Matt Judon after this year than, re-signing Za'Darius Smith. I think Judon will end up being a better player than Za'Darius Smith in the long run. So this is what the Ravens needed to do. They needed to let him walk because he was getting way too much money from the Green Bay Packers, and they just couldn't compete, and there was no reason to even try to compete with that. But we're not done with losing players here, because the Ravens lost a fourth player yesterday in John Brown. And this is another player that I basically expected to walk out of Baltimore. John Brown got an offer from the Bills, 3 years, $27 million. It's a more modest deal, obviously, than some of the other deals the Ravens players have got. But John Brown, look, I love John Brown. What he brought to the Ravens offense with Joe Flacco at quarterback was amazing. And he was an overall great dude to have on this team. It was just really fun to have John Brown. I really liked him on this team. But after they switched over to Lamar Jackson at quarterback, it became very clear to me that he didn't just not fit. He didn't mold well with this type of quarterback. John Brown's a speedster. John Brown goes down the field. John Brown catches the ball down the field. You've got to take deep shots at John Brown. Lamar Jackson wasn't, doing that. It was more of a running offense, a quick screen offense, an over-the-middle throw offense, get those slants, those in routes, and occasionally those out routes. You're not throwing a go route deep if you're Lamar Jackson. I mean, it happened a few times, but rarely. And there's, I'm not attacking Lamar Jackson. I'm just saying that's what happened last year. He worked with his strength, which is rushing and quick passes. The Ravens made the playoffs that way. It worked, but it's not going to work long-term with John Brown, playing a role where he's, not sure what he's going to have to do. So I thought it would be better off if John Brown just left the Ravens, found his own new deal, and the Ravens could get, someone for cheaper, who wouldn't command as much money to be your speedy down-the-field guy, because you still need one. So John Brown ends up in Buffalo, and I think it's going to be a great fit for him in Buffalo. They've got Josh Allen, who has a cannon of an arm. I don't know how he's going to pan out as a quarterback, but the one thing I do know about Josh Allen is he can throw it anywhere on the field. So he is basically like Joe Flacco in that dimension. He's got a huge arm. He can just chuck the ball deep. So John Brown should fit right in. No problems there. And it's going to be a much better scheme fit for him. And the Ravens obviously made the right call not re-signing him. Again, don't put the money on him if you're not really going to use him in the way that's going to be the most productive. And I think John Brown made the right call and not really, trying to get the Ravens to re-sign him for, a lot of money. Maybe he did, I don't know, but he made the right decision, I think, in Buffalo at least. Moving on, the last story of yesterday, basically, maybe the biggest story in the NFL. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. This is not the biggest story in the NFL. We're not going to talk about the Odell Beckham trade. If you want to hear about the Odell Beckham trade, listen to Goal Line Stance, this upcoming podcast. It's coming back, Goal Line Stance podcast, and we'll talk about Odell Beckham Jr. with my friend Nick Sparber, a Giants fan himself, and he's got a lot to say about that. So if you want to hear our opinions on that, go there. But what I will say about the second biggest move yesterday, it's Le'Veon Bell to the Jets. Now, okay, this annoyed me a little bit, Le'Veon Bell, because I don't really want Le'Veon Bell in this offense. I think he's a locker room problem. I think that he's pretty much past his prime, okay? And I think it would just command too much money. So three problems with Le'Veon Bell right there. Everybody wanted Le'Veon Bell, and Le'Veon Bell starts playing these games and where he's going to go, okay? This is not unlike Le'Veon Bell. So the Le'Veon Bell sweepstakes, they finally come to close early in the morning yesterday, 12:30 in the morning, right? This is when the word breaks that he's with the Jets, and I'm still awake, only because I have this lead, this make believe lead from Marlon Humphrey, right? That Le'Veon Bell is going to announce where he's going on his rap album that's coming out, and Marlon Humphrey's saying it's the Ravens. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll write an article. I'll be ready for it, but I'm not going to, get my hopes up here. But I'm gonna stay up just in case, and I'm gonna listen to this rap album. So I recruited some Ravens fans on Twitter to help me out. We listened, we kind of divided and conquered these songs, and within like 10-15 minutes it became very clear that there was nothing on this album that suggested the Ravens or any other team. Okay, so Bell ends up going to the Jets. This news breaks like basically 30 minutes after this album drops. My feeling is Le'Veon Bell just started telling people, hey, I'm going to say it on my album, so people would go and listen to his album, which was not very good, by the way. I couldn't even understand. He's a mumble rapper, apparently. I couldn't understand a word he was saying. It was very difficult to listen to. So he ends up signing a deal with the Jets, and I'm fine with this because I honestly did not want Le'Veon Bell on the Baltimore Ravens. There are better running backs. Well, better running backs to get in the sense that there are not going to be problems on the team with him, and for cheaper, and we could draft younger. And Le'Veon Bell's had injuries and suspensions. And we got a running back that I really like, and we'll talk about him soon. But I didn't think Le'Veon Bell would be a good addition to the Ravens, and apparently I'm not alone in thinking this. The Jets give him $52.5 million on a 4-year contract, $35 million guaranteed. That's not exactly the number he was looking to get. I think he was trying to get a lot higher than this. But this was his best offer. This is what happens when you sit out an entire year and party in Miami and rap about how you're going to get all this money, and how you're very annoyed at your team for franchise tagging you. A lot of teams just don't want to deal with it, and I think that's what basically happened here. The Jets were his highest bidder, but it appears that the Ravens were actually never even interested in Le'Veon Bell. That's what I got out of it. Jason Canfora, who I have nothing personal against Jason LaCanfora, but what I do know about him as a CBS NFL insider, is that a lot of the times his stories are either inaccurate, false, and appear to be made up sometimes, right? But he was reporting basically all day that he was hearing that the Ravens were not even talking to Le'Veon Bell, and I was just shrugging this off as, oh, he's just got, bad information again. But immediately after Le'Veon Bell signs with the Jets, Adam Schefter goes on ESPN and says, well, it turns out the Ravens were not even talking to Bell. It appears that Le'Veon Bell's agent fabricated the entire story about the Baltimore Ravens and deliberately pushed it to try to get the Jets to go up higher. And the Jets ended up giving him a deadline because he was taking way too long for them. And the Jets were like, you got to sign today or else we're going to rescind this offer. So Le'Veon Bell ends up signing with the Jets there. But the fact that they fabricated this whole story about the Ravens and all these, people picked it up, and other people were saying that the Ravens were interested. Jeff Za'Darius of The Athletic said he was hearing both things at once. I mean, there were conflicting reports. I was just going with the Ravens were, interested because that's what everybody was saying. I don't have these sources that Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, Jeff Za'Darius, even Jason LaCanfora. I don't have these sources. I go off of what the insiders are saying, and all the insiders except for Canfora were saying the Ravens were interested, and Za'Darius, our Ravens insider of The Athletic, was basically saying that he's heard both, and he's really not sure. So, I just assumed they would at least make an offer, but they didn't even talk to Bell, it sounds like. He would have been a huge drain on the salary cap, though, and a locker room problem. Again, history of injuries, suspensions. I think the Ravens should honestly just go draft a running back in, some of the earlier rounds, within the first 3 rounds. Find a guy you think can be the leader in the future. I'm not sure if Gus Edwards is going to be your leader in the future, because, the Ravens have a history of finding running backs that are going to be good for 1 year, and then who completely tank in year 2. And I don't want that to happen to Gus Edwards, but it's happened, let's see, to Alex Collins, to Justin Forsett. You could even say Terrence West if you want, right? It just keeps happening, and we're getting burned, time after time after time here. Someone's just got to find, a real running back for once. And I think they found one in the guy they signed today. They can use him for like 2 to 3 years, but he's, 29, and we're going to talk about him. but he is 29, and we're going to have to find someone for long term. I think the Ravens should turn to the draft and find, maybe they can't find anybody, maybe they don't really like anybody, then wait till next year. But at least be prepared to move on to a younger guy soon. But in the end, Le'Veon Bell signs with the Jets. A lot of the Ravens flock were very disappointed. I was fine with this. I didn't really want Le'Veon. Too crazy, too costly, too everything for me. So Le'Veon is not signing with the Baltimore Ravens. But a player that is signing with the Baltimore Ravens, and this broke this afternoon around 12 o'clock in the afternoon, that player is Earl Thomas, the former safety of the Seattle Seahawks, the free safety, and the last vestige of the Legion of Boom on that team last year. I'll give you a rundown on the timeline here. Basically, Earl Thomas was expected to have a lot of interest from a lot of teams. A lot of people went for the younger guys. He's 29 right now. He will turn 30 in May. A lot of teams went for the younger guys. Tyrann Mathieu, Adrian Amos signed with the Green Bay Packers. But ultimately, the Ravens are going to target Earl Thomas. And that is because, maybe not because, but the expectation was, at least yesterday, for much of yesterday, that the Ravens were not alone. The chief bidder on Earl Thomas was the Browns, and the Browns were expected to be the ones who were going to land Earl Thomas. This morning, Mike Garafolo, other reporters start reporting that, wait a minute here, the Browns aren't even talking to Earl Thomas. And at this point, I'm like, okay, we cut Eric Weddle. The Browns reportedly were going to sign Earl Thomas, not even interested. We need a safety. He's the best safety on the market. We have a ton of cap space, almost $30 million. We haven't signed anybody yet. This sounds like a Ravens move to me. So I'm getting ready, I'm going to write an article about this before it breaks, just in case. I go away from my phone, my desk, my computer for like 10 minutes. I come back. I look at my phone. It's blowing up. Earl Thomas signed to the Baltimore Ravens. I'm like, are you kidding me? Right? Like, I'm happy about the signing, but I wasn't prepared for this. So this is me at 12 noon now, scrambling to write an article, I wasn't ready for. Earl Thomas signed a deal with the Baltimore Ravens for $55 million over 4 years. Now, I do think they maybe smidged this a little bit in overpaying him just a tad bit here. This is a lot of money to give a 29-year-old who is coming off of a broken leg last year. But the bright side of this, $32 million guaranteed, and it's a lot, but $22 million of that 55. I don't know if it's of the $32 million guaranteed. At least $22 million will be given to Earl Thomas in the first 9 months of his contract, as Adam Schefter is reporting on ESPN. On his Twitter, Adam Schefter of ESPN reporting on Twitter that he's going to get $22 million in the first 9 months. So it looks like the Ravens are basically front-loading his contract so that the older he gets, the more injury-prone he gets, the less of a chance they're going to have to pay a lot of money to him for getting injured, for getting cut, etc. But look, this is arguably the biggest splash the Ravens have made in a few years now, signing Earl Thomas, a very good safety. Let's not brush over this. Earl Thomas is a very good safety. Okay, but he is getting older, so I think it's an upgrade at the position. You can argue about it all you want with Eric Weddle. I believe it's an upgrade at the safety position. He's younger. He's more efficient at this point than Eric Weddle is at this point in his career. I think the Ravens probably overpaid him just a little bit. They had to get him away from the Cowboys' grip. But, after losing Eric Weddle and not having any free safeties on the depth chart, you have to make some sort of move. And the Ravens made it, and of course they were losing other players, and they had to do something to kind of reel our confidence back in here, reel this defense back into becoming one of the best. This secondary is going to be one of the best secondaries if Jimmy Smith is not cut. And I say Jimmy Smith might get cut because he's due $15 million next year. With this $22 million, if they actually do give it to him in the first year, the Ravens might have to clear some cap space. Jimmy Smith could be the cap casualty here. But if this secondary does stand, you've got Earl Thomas, a free safety, Tony Jefferson, a strong safety, Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Carr, Jimmy Smith at corner. You've got Deshaun Elliott and Chuck Clark as your backup safeties. You have Anthony Levine, who might be back on this roster. You've got Anthony Averett and Maurice Kennedy as your developmental guys at corner. I mean, this is a stacked secondary. This is going to be the best secondary in the league next year. As long as nobody gets injured, nobody gets cut, everyone performs to what they should perform to. This is the best secondary in the league. The Ravens just need to figure out their linebacker strategy going forward and their pass rushers. But, I mean, this is phenomenal what the secondary is going to look like. The Ravens can free up $9 million by cutting Jimmy Smith, but I don't know if they will, honestly, because now they have to deal with the Browns, who have OBJ, Jarvis Landry, not Brashad Perriman anymore. He was going to sign with the Browns and then left after the OBJ trade because his role would be diminished. But they've got other receivers, David Njoku out there. Really, really talented team the Browns have on offense. And the Ravens, look, they're getting ready to fight for the division here. So, Earl Thomas, again, one of the biggest splashes the Ravens have made in free agency in recent memory. And the Ravens love their safeties. Ed Reed over the years. Eric Weddle, they drafted Matt Elam, didn't work out. But they love their safeties, and I think this is a good addition overall, although it is a little pricey for the Ravens. 10 minutes after that, I'm getting ready to write this article now, and the Mark Ingram news breaks. Now, at least I knew this was coming because of Mike Silver's report yesterday that the Ravens were very close, and I just assumed that Le'Veon Bell would end up signing with the Jets, which he did. So I wrote this article yesterday, but I had to revise it a little bit for today. So I was ready for this one. 10 minutes after the news broke on Earl Thomas, we get confirmation that the Ravens have officially signed Mark Ingram, or at least intend to sign at the new league year, which has now happened about an hour ago at 4 o'clock. Mark Ingram signs, the former Saints running back, signs with the Ravens on a 3-year, $15 million deal. $5 million per year for Mark Ingram. Congratulations, Eric DeCosta. You got the steal of free agency so far. This is a great deal for the Baltimore Ravens. This is fantastic. Mark Ingram, that downhill runner you want to pair with Lamar Jackson, that Gus Edwards, he fulfilled that role last year. You get an insurance policy if Gus Edwards can't do it this year. You get a proven guy. He's going to be 29 for basically all this year until December. He's got gas left in the tank. I think he's still got at least 3 years left in the tank. You get him on 3 years, $5 million per year for Mark Ingram. Are you kidding me? This is a great deal. I can't stress how much I love this deal for the Ravens. This is perfect. Mark Ingram is a fantastic running back, super well respected by his teammates, super well respected by the entire NFL. Got lots of gas left in the tank. The price is amazing. The player is amazing. And this is a perfect match schematically with the Ravens. This is, my favorite Eric DeCosta move so far. He's only been GM for a month now. But this is a really great move. This is probably my favorite move free agency. I love Earl Thomas, but it was a little costly. The price they got on Mark Ingram, it's really, really good. I thought they might be able to get him for 4, but they would have had to add 1 or 2 years on that contract. 3 years, $15 million, perfect. I'm happy with this. This is a great deal. Great deal for the Ravens. But to end our free agency talk here before we, dabble with our draft player of the week. I'm going to talk about Zach Brown. Again, I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that the Baltimore Ravens were interested in Brandon Marshall, the linebacker for the Denver Broncos, and Brandon Marshall, could be a good fit, but I think Zach Brown, right, the former linebacker of the Redskins, Buffalo Bills, and I forget there was another team in there too, Tennessee Titans, I think he would be a better player for the Baltimore Ravens to grab. And I say this because he's going to be cheaper. The Redskins tried to get rid of him. They tried to trade him. They wanted to get C.J. Mosley, actually. So they started shopping Zach Brown around, but they couldn't find anybody that would take him. They're going to cut him. Lots of linebackers already off the market. It's day 3 now, free agency frenzy. Zach Brown will be affordable for the Baltimore Ravens. He's going to be affordable. I think that, he's 29. He's, still got years left ahead of him. He could be a stopgap. He could be, a starter for 4 years. Who knows? But he's going to bring the linebacker core a little leadership in a time where they've lost C.J. Mosley, and they need somebody to come in here and do really well. I think Zach Brown can be that player. Now, last year, he played in 12 games, or started 12 games. 96 combined tackles. That's pretty darn good for a linebacker. I think the Redskins just thought it was too costly to keep him. They have to inhale that Alex Smith contract, and he might not even play next year after that terrible leg injury, that infection that came after surgery. So Zach Brown on the market. I think he's a good option for the Ravens. Stopgap, could be a little bit longer term of a starter. Go get him, Eric DeCosta. You can get him cheap. I promise you that. So to wrap up today's episode, we're going to dive off a little bit of free agency here and go back into the draft. Now, I said that we'd have our draft prospect of the week, and we do. With the loss of our edge rushers here in Terrell Suggs and Za'Darius Smith, I thought it would be appropriate to look at an edge rusher. And this week's edge rusher will be Montez Sweat. Now, Montez Sweat, Mississippi State product, 6'6", 260-pound linebacker or edge rusher. He could be a DE, whatever you need him. He could play in a 3-4-4-3. Doesn't really matter for him. He's, got that 35 and 3/4 arm length, those 10.5-inch hands. This dude's huge, but he's also very, very fast. He's got that 4.41 40-yard dash speed, very quick 3-cone drill, 7.0 seconds, 4.29 on the 20-yard shuttle. You've got, other indications. He's strong, 21 bench press reps, 36.0 vertical jump, 125 broad jump, lots of speed, lots of agility, freakish athlete for his size. I think Montez Sweat can become one of the premier edge rushers in the league, coming out of Mississippi State here. Mississippi State, he played there for 2 years. He transferred from Michigan State. In those 2 years at Mississippi State, he recorded 101 total tackles, 22.5 sacks. So double-digit sacks in both the years, actually. Fantastic 2 years for him. And I think he could make a huge impact on the Ravens if the Ravens can grab him at 22. He might go a little higher, he might go a little lower. He might be there, he might not be there. For a full player evaluation on Montez Sweat, you can check out BaltimoreFeather.com. We're going to be publishing that in the next few days. So that wraps up today's episode of Nest Talk. So just a bit of housekeeping. The Goal Line Stance podcast with Nick Barber is coming back soon, within the week, I would say. So stay tuned. You can follow it on Goal Line Stance on Twitter. That's an NFL-based podcast, not just the Baltimore Ravens. We talk about all teams, all divisions, everything going on in the NFL. We're going to be talking about the free agency frenzy and look ahead to the draft. You can follow Nest Talk at Nest Talk on Twitter. You can hit up Baltimore Feather at Be More Feather on Twitter. You can also find us and like us on Facebook to stay up to date with the latest and greatest Ravens news, or just go on to BaltimoreFeather.com for all your Baltimore Ravens needs. You can find me at Chris Linfont on Twitter. I'm always willing to talk Baltimore Ravens with anybody. So long, everybody. Have a great week, great rest of your day. I look forward to next week as we have more free agency and draft news coming ahead for the Baltimore Ravens. So long, and have a great day, everybody.